I don't think the boys wasted Firecracker because they killed her. I think they wasted her because they had the bones of a genuinely disturbing Christian tragedy sitting right there. And then chose the cartoon version. Not the haunting version. Not the version that understands what spiritual betrayal actually costs. The easy version. The blunt version. The version where Christian imagery gets used as a weapon, but not as a wound. And that is what frustrates me. Because this is The Boys. I'm not walking into this show expecting a Sunday school lesson. Firecracker's ending did not have to be Christian safe. It did not have to be respectful. It did not have to be comforting or sanitized. But if you're going to use Christianity as the center of a character's spiritual collapse, then the tragedy should understand what it is actually tearing apart. And with Firecracker, the show almost had it. Almost. Because the idea is strong. Homelander killing Firecracker because he can sense that, deep down, she still belongs more to Jesus than to him? That is horrifying. That is almost great. The problem is that the show treats it like shock value instead of true tragedy. Firecracker should not have been another member of the Seven getting crossed off the board. She should have been the most disturbing religious horror arc this show has ever attempted. Because her real conflict was never, do I love Homelander enough? Her real conflict should have been, can I destroy the part of myself that still knows Homelander is not God? That is what the episode almost touched, and then ran away from. In the actual version, Homelander forces Firecracker to betray the pastor who raised her, destroy a symbol of her childhood faith, and prove she loves him more than Jesus Christ. On paper, that is insane. A woman raised in Christianity, slowly coerced into replacing God with Homelander, publicly betraying the person who spiritually formed her, destroying the last physical reminder of innocent faith, and still failing because some buried part of her heart refuses to fully submit to Homelander. That should hurt. But the way it plays, it feels strangely thin. It feels like the show understood the image, but not the wound. Because if you actually understand Christianity, the horror is not simply, Firecracker did something offensive. The horror is that Firecracker's heart is divided. Her ambition wants Homelander. Her wounded pride wants Homelander. Her need to be chosen, desired, elevated, and touched by power wants Homelander. But some buried, stubborn, inconvenient part of her spirit still knows the difference between God and an idol. And that is unbearable to her. Somewhere inside her, beneath the propaganda, resentment, fame, lust, politics, and desperate need to be chosen by the most powerful man alive, she knows Homelander is not God. And that is the part of herself she hates the most. Because she does not want to repent. She does not want to run back to Christ. She does not want to be saved. She wants to stop wanting salvation. That is the spiritual horror. Conviction is painful when you want the sin more than you want the rescue. So every betrayal should have meant something. Every lie should have meant something. Every time she twists scripture for Homelander, she should not just be acting like a hypocrite. She should be trying to rewrite her very soul. Trying to say the lie enough times that the last honest part of her finally dies. That is way darker than just killing her off. Imagine Firecracker not as a joke Christian nationalist caricature, but as a woman actively trying to amputate her conscience. At first, it is easy. She lies, she flatters him, she defends him, she says God appointed him, she convinces herself loving Homelander is just another form of obedience. But then he makes her cross lines that are not merely political anymore. They are spiritual. He makes her betray the people, symbols, and memories that first taught her God's name. And every time she does it, she thinks, this will finally silence the part of me that still remembers God. But it never does. Because that is how conviction works. You can bury it, mock it, perform rebellion on its grave, drown it in applause, desire, fame, power, politics, and resentment. But when you know, you know. And Firecracker, she knows. That is why the arc should not be about her being secretly innocent. She is not innocent. That is what makes it tragic. She is participating. She is choosing. She is destroying herself piece by piece. And the more she does it, the more desperate she becomes for Homelander to finally say, yes, you are completely mine now. But he can't. Because he can still sense the division. He can still sense that her worship has a crack in it. And for Homelander, that crack is unbearable. That is where the story could have made him more interesting too. Homelander killing people is predictable. We already know he can do that. We already know he is cruel. We already know he demands worship and punishes failure. But Homelander keeping Firecracker alive because he wants to win against God inside her heart? That is more disturbing. Because then she is not just another member of the Seven to him. She is proof. She is the test case. She is the one person who comes to him with a language of worship already built into her. She knows what prayer is. She knows what surrender is. She knows what it means to call something Lord. And Homelander sees that and thinks, if I can make her give that to me, then I have beaten the thing she used to worship. That is devilish. Not romantic, not sympathetic, devilish. He does not keep her alive because he loves her. He keeps her alive because her divided heart is an insult to him. Her faith becomes the one room in the house he cannot enter. And Homelander cannot stand that. He does not just want obedience. He does not just want fear. He wants conversion. He wants Firecracker to look at the God who formed her, the Christ she still cannot fully abandon, and choose him instead. He wants her to mean it. And the fact that she can't drives him insane. Because if even this broken, fame-hungry, compromised woman still has some place in her heart he cannot conquer, then maybe Homelander isn't God. And that is the one truth he cannot survive. The show had all of the pieces set. False God, corrupted worship, Christian imagery, a woman torn between conviction and idolatry, a man desperate to be worshipped, a public betrayal, a private spiritual collapse. It had everything, but instead of letting that become a descent, it speed ran the most obvious version. Accuse the pastor, break the Jesus doll, fail the loyalty test, die. And I'm sorry, but that is the least interesting version of that material. Because the darker version is not Homelander killing her. The darker version is Firecracker choosing him. Here is the version that I wish we got. Firecracker calls Homelander God the way she already kind of does. Part performance, part politics, part desire, part genuine devotion. She says the words because they get her close to him. They make her useful. They make her special. But privately, she still prays. Not beautifully, not consistently, not like some secretly pure martyr. Ugly prayers, confused prayers, selfish prayers. Maybe she asks God to forgive her and then immediately goes back to Homelander. Maybe she tells herself she is only praying out of habit. Maybe she hates herself for doing it. Maybe she hates God for still listening. Then Homelander finds out. And that is when the tests begin. Not random cruelty, targeted cruelty. Before Homelander makes Firecracker betray her pastor, he should shatter the emotional scaffolding of her faith first. Because the darkest version of the story is not Homelander saying, "Prove you love me." The darkest version is Homelander making her believe every wound in her life is evidence against God himself. That is peak Homelander villainy. He should not sound like a debate bro explaining the problem of evil. He should sound like Homelander. Cruel, personal, intimate, part therapist, part tyrant, part jealous God. He is not trying to disprove God. He is prosecuting God using Firecracker's own wounds as the evidence. He tells her he has read the Bible. Of course he has. Vought needed him to play the all-American Christian superhero for years. He had to know their language, the rallies, the speeches, the verses to quote before walking on stage wrapped in the American flag. And he smiles, not warmly. Beautiful book. Very useful. Then he leans forward. But you and I both know it never saved you. That is the first cut. Then he keeps going. If God loved you so much, where was he when your parents died? Where was he when Starlight ruined your pageant career? Where was he when the world laughed at you? Then softer, where was he when you were begging someone, anyone, to look at you and see something worth loving? Now he is not attacking Christianity in the abstract. He is attacking the emotional reason she still clings to it. He is turning every unanswered prayer into evidence. Then he twists the knife. And who did God choose instead? Firecracker looks up at him. Homelander smiles. Starlight. The girl who called you trash. The girl who smiled for cameras while your life fell apart. His voice sharpens. That is his girl? That is the light? Then his voice drops. And you still want him? That line should not be screamed. It should almost sound wounded. Like her faith is a personal insult to him. Like every remaining piece of loyalty to Christ is a betrayal to Homelander. Then he steps closer. You don't want God. You want all of this. He points to himself. The suit, the cameras, the applause, the power. Then he looks at her in a way that makes her hate herself for wanting him to. The heat in your chest when I look at you and you feel chosen for once in your life. Firecracker trembles. He sees it. He enjoys it. You want what you're not supposed to want. You want to stop being the sad little church girl asking permission from a God who never answered. Then he smiles like he is offering mercy. I'm not corrupting you, Firecracker. I'm opening your eyes. That is Homelander's theology. God did nothing. I am here. I am power. I am the answer your prayers never gave you. Then he says, so prove it. And Firecracker knows what he means before he has to say it. That is when the pastor betrayal should begin. Not randomly. Not as shock value. As the next stage in a spiritual execution. First, Homelander makes her feel like the pastor was part of her cage. Like her faith was humiliation dressed up as virtue. Like loyalty to God is the last chain keeping her from becoming everything that she wants. Then he demands the public betrayal. But that should only be the first wound. Because later, after she ruins the pastor, after he is arrested and dragged away, Firecracker should go back to him. At first, it looks like a rescue, a prison break, a moment of conscience. She gets him out. She tells him to run. For 1 second, the audience thinks, maybe this is it. Maybe she came back. Maybe there is still enough of the old Firecracker left to save the man who raised her. And the pastor believes it too. That is what makes it hurt. He is scared, but hopeful. He calls her by her real name, not Firecracker, her name, the name she had before Vought, before Homelander, before all of this. For 1 second, she hears the girl she used to be. They get outside the fence. The alarm is screaming. The lights are sweeping over them. The pastor tells her to keep running, but Firecracker stops. He turns back, confused. Then she grabs his arm, too hard, hard enough that he winces, then hard enough that he screams, and that is when he realizes she did not come to rescue him. She came to convert him. She starts repeating Homelander's words, not perfectly, like she is reciting something she memorized to survive. She tells him the Bible made her weak. She tells him God abandoned her. She tells him the meek inherit nothing. She tells him Starlight was the one God chose, and Starlight destroyed her. She tells him every prayer she ever prayed came back empty. And the pastor, even terrified, refuses to agree with her. Because this is the one thing he will never surrender. He is no longer just a prop in her fall. He becomes the witness to the truth she is trying to kill in herself. Firecracker squeezes harder, not because she hates him completely, because some part of her still loves him, and that makes his refusal unbearable. Then the old self comes through, just for a second. She stops performing, stops preaching Homelander's words, and she begs, not coldly, desperately. Please, just say it. Just worship him. If you worship him, he'll let you live. Her idea of salvation has been inverted. She thinks surrender to Homelander is mercy. And the pastor looks at her, heartbroken, and refuses. Maybe he says something simple. Not a speech. Not a sermon. Just, he is not God. That line should destroy her, because she knows. Then Homelander descends, slowly, gliding down like he owns the entire sky, and Firecracker turns toward him, caught between terror and relief. Because now her God is here. Now the test has a witness. Now she can prove herself. But Homelander looks at the pastor and sees the thing he hates the most. Not weakness, not rebellion, faith he cannot conquer. So he does not debate him. He does not make a speech. He simply lasers him, fast, brutal, final, and the pastor drops. A martyr in the dirt, blood across Firecracker's face. For 1 second, she breaks. Not fully, but enough. Maybe she remembers water, a baptism, a hand on her shoulder, a voice telling her she was loved by God. Then Homelander snaps. He yells her name. He threatens to laser her too if she does not answer him. And that is the moment where her soul makes the choice. Not because she is calm, not because she is healed, because she is terrified, broken, and desperate to make the horror mean something. She looks at the pastor's body, then at Homelander, and she chooses the idol. She wipes nothing away. She leaves the blood on her face like a baptism into damnation. Then she steps toward Homelander, and instead of him pulling her in, she wraps her arm around him first. That matters, because that is the choice. That is her crossing the line. He did not save her. He did not comfort her. He did not love her. He murdered the man who represented the last bridge back to God. And she still chooses to fly away with him. Homelander untouched. Firecracker shaking. The pastor dead below them. That is spiritual horror. Not, say something bad about your pastor, but, if I am your God, destroy the man who first taught you my rival's name. That is savage. That is personal. That is the version where Homelander feels terrifying because he is not just killing bodies. He is trying to convert souls through humiliation. But even after that, it still should not be enough. Because Firecracker is not really trying to convince Homelander anymore. She is trying to become the kind of person who can call him God and not hear another name echo underneath it. So you give her one final chance. Imagine Butcher finally has Homelander. Maybe the virus is in play. Maybe Homelander is vulnerable for 1 second. Not dead. Not defeated. But bleeding. Breathing hard. Looking less like a god and more like a man pretending not to be afraid. And Firecracker, she sees it. She sees the monster. She sees the weakness. She sees the man she called God bleeding like any other man. For 1 second, the idol becomes visible. Not divine, not eternal, not worthy, just powerful, just cruel, just flesh. Then Annie reaches out to her, not with a speech, just one sentence. He is not God. And Firecracker knows. In her heart, she knows. The truth lands, not as revelation, as memory. She remembers the pastor, the water, the old name, the God she had been trying to bury for so long. For 1 second, she sees the way out of it all. And then she looks at Annie. Starlight. The girl who ruined her. The girl who got to be clean. The girl Homelander told her God chose instead of you. And something in Firecracker hardens. Maybe the truth could have reached her, but not from Annie. Not from her. So Firecracker looks at the way out and hates the person holding the door open for her. Then she chooses Homelander, not because she is fully convinced, because she is tired of being divided. She wants one final act to make the decision her heart never could. She steps between Homelander and death, not because she has finally stopped believing in God, but because she wants her final act to bury the part of her that still does. She dies saving the false God who would never save her. And maybe, in her final breath, she does not say something clean. She does not say, I was wrong. She does not say, forgive me. She says something broken. Something like, let this be enough. Not to God, to Homelander. Because even dying, she is still begging her idol to accept the worship her soul could never fully give him. That is her ending. Not Homelander killing her because she failed. Firecracker damning herself because she wants failure to become devotion. Then her death is not just another edgy kill. It becomes the final proof of what the boys is always trying to say about worship, power, celebrity, politics, and idolatry. Homelander does not just kill people. He replaces God in them. And Firecracker could have been the clearest example of that. A woman trying to tear God out of her chest so she could give the empty space to Homelander. That is horrifying. That is biblical. That is the boys at its darkest. And that is the version that I wish that we got. Instead, the episode rushes through the spiritual betrayal, uses Christian imagery like shock props, and kills her before the idea has time to become truly disturbing. That is why I think they wasted her. Not because she needed to live. Not because I loved her character. Not because I wanted a redemption arc. I wanted the tragedy to earn itself. I wanted the show to understand the thing it was mocking deeply enough to make the mockery hurt. Because when you understand faith, apostasy is not just, I did a bad thing. It is not just breaking a rule. It is not just being offensive. It is the slow destruction of the part of you that still knows where home is. That was the story Firecracker almost had. Not heroic redemption. Not clean repentance. Not a last-second return to God. Something darker. A woman who sees the truth, hates the truth, and gives herself to the lie anyway. That is what makes Homelander even scarier. That is what turns Firecracker from a punchline into a warning. And that is what the show left on the table. The show killed her body. The better version would have let us watch her kill her own soul.